He sat at his computer, tongue sticking out of his upper lower lips in anticipation. A long nailed, fat, grimy index finger clicked on the mouse in a dizzy pace. An observer might have thought out there it was an insane miniature tap dancer somewhere underneath the piles of filth that surrounded the man. However, no tap dancer could effectively practice their talent in this cramped and deplorable dwelling. The apartment smelled old food, old clothes, old sweat, and old urine. The older keepsakes from the time when Meek was a different man, and then the behemoth he is sitting behind his computer now, peeked through the places where the trash didn't take over. A narrow path wound its way up and around the dwelling, taking Meek to the vital place that he needed to go when life interrupted. Path to the bathroom was rarely used anymore, and then another forked 30 degrees to the apartment entrance. Others led to the kitchen that might have once resembled the dining room. Another path ended abruptly in front of the bedroom's entrance, a ramp of filth almost reaching the smoke alarm before the above of the doorframe. The high amount of detritus that forms those paths when the momentum's showing the slough of the recent past in an involuntarily story of the ground group. Most of the bottoms were newspapers that he used when he was carrying seemed to still be around second nature, soak up the vomit and spilled beer. After insulting the layers of refuse began to accumulate above them, however. The carpet became more passed to his thoughts. An empty flattened tampon box for those corner jutted out from the disgusting hillocks near his computer, caught at the corner of his eye. His wife Marie had left him about a year or more ago, but he barely remembered what she looked like. Even dust and grime covered a picture laying face up on the monitor, offered a view of a woman he didn't really remember knowing. She looked at their infant daughter, Krista, with her as it became clear that Meek was quite an incapable of anything besides playing his online game. He suddenly kicked a small mound of pizza boxes under his desk in frustration, as his main game character fell to his demise off of a ravine into the pixelated lava below. The group he was running in this dungeon would doubtably boot him off of their group as failure to keep up. He kicked the mound again, his long, yellow big toenail piercing through a hole at the box into what appears to be the wall beyond. The pain barely registered first due to Meek seeing that his internet connection had been terminated. He stomped his foot to the never moist down colored spot on the floor to his left. The pungent smell that he had all become immune ran through his nostrils. He glanced at his fractured toenail, now resembling that as a misshapen tip of a blooded spear. He grabbed the foot in pain and cursed at the monitor before him. The game character, a skeleton, appeared at the bottom of the molten orange doom. He worked so hard to get the game character to this point. Now this? Did he cut into the coax cable and supplied for his internet access with his toenail? How did he kick something else? Bald-headed did Christ, he yelled into the screen before him, a middle finger echoing what be the mountains of garbage near him wouldn't let his voice do. He quickly stood, the crusty stained seat cushion briefly sticking to his rear and bringing the chair up and then down with a plastic wheel bang, trying to think quickly for a second solution to his connectivity problem. He made his way to the kitchen path, slowly limping to the telephone. He was surprised at how much he had been sweating. The AC, was it broken too? He silently thanked his dead mother for the trust fund that she had left him to sustain his living these past few years. He would call the landlady after the cable company. He became lightheaded as his overweight frame limpered amongst the refuse and vomited into an empty cereal box before entering the kitchen. Grabbing a dusty and half a beer off of what seemed to be the dining room table, he drank, expelling the acid taste from his mouth. He dried heat from the taste of the old beer. Thankfully, that taste of puke no longer lingered. He had used the phone in ages. There was no need to. Really, he had used both of his hands to claw through some of the hamburger wrappers, matted and paper towels that were estimated to be the phone to be. Several cockroaches scampered away from his touch, and their surreptitious duties temporarily put on hiatus. He was correct in his assumption of where his phone should be. He was incorrect, thinking the phone was still there, however. He faintly remembered Marie's saying how the phone's ringer woke up the baby at night, since they could really afford one bedroom place at the time. The kid had to sleep in the living room, and since they had no cells at the time, the home was redundant. So did she move it? Put it away? Throw it out? Ah! He said as he picked up the small, itchy brown piece of crust from the back of his leg, clawing at the skin underneath. His toe was bleeding worse now. The toenail, to which he thought it was examined to be the brighter of light of the kitchen. The nail cracked vertically all the way down, and apparently breaking beneath the skin as well. His toe was easily twice the size that he had been the glimpy trek of the kitchen, a sickly wedding of purple and yellow. Meek didn't know the first place took of it that Marie put it somewhere else, but quite frankly, he didn't feel like dragging through any more mounds to look. Another option was the bedroom. There was a landline connection in there, but maybe buried in somewhat there. His desire to get back to his game, coupled with the throbbing foot, provided him to go back and look. He wobbled along the bedroom path, straight down the hallway, and the carpet trod on, making sickening, wet sounds. He paused for a glance into the bathroom, and he stopped using months ago. A brown, conical shape of solid and brown and green substance protruded from the grimy toilet. You could see several flies tending to their young in their shape, buzzing with parental defenses as they scent Meek's presence. Matted balls of toilet paper stood up knee-high, occasionally broken by the mounds of the empty beer bottles. The bottle tops almost looked as if the brown mouths were drowning in the sea of disgust. Smears and handprints of a darker color lined the walls. A picture hung up by the entrance of the bedroom. Meek and Marie, standing in front of the lake, Epcot Center. The baby was nestled in Meek's arms, a peaceful shroud of a sleeping evented on his face, and her happy father kissed her forehead. Was that taken before or after the wedding, he thought. He remembered that day, the baby cooing as the boat made its way through the tunnels in the Mexican section of the park. He had no idea why, but he remembered Marie giving him a light, but a tender kiss on his neck as the boat sloshed its way through the artificial passages. He made his way towards the bedroom entrance, having to limp wide through the trash that he didn't remember making. Glancing behind him, he noticed that he left a red trail of his foot dragging behind him. But of course, clearing the way took him a little longer than he thought. There were several large boxes hiding beneath the garbage that were heavier than expected. The contents of unimportant, as the longings getting back to his game presence took over the else. They were stacked high as well, almost reaching to where the door met the frame. Throwing the last box behind him in the hallway, with a grunt, he grabbed the doorknob and tried to open the bathroom door. It was locked. After several minutes of determination, he pulled a few pulls from his obese frame, and many curses in frustration. The door gave away, splintering the frame and showering Meek's forearm with the wooden debris. The room was dark and cold and surprisingly clean. The light shone from the hallway behind him, exposing the more motes of the crust. It chaotically danced at the door, being thrust open. He had really not come here in it all over a year or two. The carpet was in perfect beige, and when his family moved in a few years ago, the pictures that Marie picked out still hung around the room. Parisian Beatrick nostrils that Meek still had disdain glanced to. She insisted that since there were no windows in the room, she would have to make it as sunny as possible. The bed was made as well, and the dark brown comforter looked eerily the same color as the persistent contents of the bathroom. He glanced at the minutes before. The phone was on the nightstand on the side of the table that Meek used to sleep during the one cheerier times. With the sigh of relief, and heroin user could ever relate to getting the reclusive fixed. He limped over to the phone, with one foot and a bloody streak on the other, left brown footprints on the unmarked carpet. Sitting down on the bed, he picked up the phone's receiver and started to dial when he noticed the square-shaped thing on the corner. Since he didn't think to use to turn on the lights when he came in, and the hallway's light didn't reach the corner, he couldn't make it out what it was. He gave his toenail or toe a rub, and a hand coming back bloody. He winced in pain as the dread of realization crept up to him. There was no dial tone. This could only mean Marie had canceled the service at some point without telling him, or more likely he didn't pay the bill after she left. He couldn't remember. Grabbing the phone in frustration, he threw it directly at the square-shaped thing, cursing. He was getting very lightheaded now, and the coolness of the room had little alternative to the sweat drenching of his balding, fleshly head. He stood there and hobbled over to the square thing in the corner. As he came up beside it, he grabbed the edge of it and winced in pain, his foot feeling that if it was on fire. He looked up at the square thing now, finally realizing what it was, not just because of the physical shape, as much as its contents. The long decayed corpse of the infant lay in the center of the playpen. The skin almost resembled one of those purple-ish super hot peppers they used to see at the grocery store, making bizarre spiral patterns on top of the skull. The infant had been in a permanent scream that a wrinkled and deformed face was even no seeing something horrible before its death. That horrible thing was, it must have been loneliness. Meek thought of this as he glanced at his daughter. That thought was quickly dashed, however, when he noticed another figure sitting upright in the darker corner of beyond the crib. Marie's eyeless face pointed to the ceiling of a look of pain, as if she had died crying. One hand still rested on the corner of the playpen, and the other pulling down the shirt where her breast would have been. She would have given the infant, Christina, that was her name, one last meal before she had herself expired. Cursing in worried anticipation, he picked up the phone. It was thankfully still in one piece with the cord from the wall still attached to it, and hobbled over to the bedroom door, deciding that he would try the kitchen's phone receptional, but was now feverish desperation. As he made his way through the door frame, he immediately saw a problem. The heavy boxes that had been thrown behind him in frenzy moments before now made a heavy wall merge with the garbage piles. You could see a portion of his computer monitor beyond. A bubbly orange haze throughout the cardboard and refuse. His foot throbbed, and his chest, suddenly contorted in pain and preservation, began to take over his fevered body. Dropping the phone, he fell to his hands and knees and crawled over towards the barricade. The first box before him, it wasn't so bad to move, but, however, it was next to impossible. He positioned himself and where he was, and then he slumped over it, and he sensed a cockroach that must have partially killed with his weight tickled the side of his torso. Just a rest, he mumbled. The kitchen is just around the corner. So close. I will have my internet back within the hour. Just one phone call, he thought, longingly looking at his computer screen through the cardboard and refused cracks. His heart finally took his frustration and toe pain with him along with it. And that, my little pretties, was Meek, a creepypasta written by Mystreve. My final thoughts on this story? I honestly really found this story to be a pretty good pasta that is about utter regret, neglect that could involuntarily shape a person's horror. But yeah, this honestly was the author's note I see in the beginning. And I honestly have to say, I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was pretty neat. I remember Shadow Reader narrated this story about a, what was it? Oh yeah, it was about like back on his old channel before it was terminated, and I do know for a fact that he re uploaded that. I mean, I've seen other people narrated this story as well, so I definitely have to say, I mean, it's a good story, but I definitely would have to say it's probably one of the best creepypastas I've seen. Like, I've seen Creepypasta narrated this one, and I believe Mr. Creepypasta also narrated this one. I'm not sure, but I believe he did. But I am really surprised that this is actually the author's first attempt at making a good story. I mean, this, even if people say they can't make like a good story, but I mean, take this story for an example. If you want to know, oh, I want to make a good story, but I don't know how, take this for a good example. I think this story actually is amazing. I'm surprised that this was the author's first attempt, but this story was actually pretty good for the author's first attempt. Like, I was actually surprised when I first saw this one, even when Shadow Reader actually mentioned it when he reviewed it. I really do like how well made this story is, especially with the concept of it, the good grammar, the sentence structuring, the storyline. But what also got me really wondering was, the fact that the mom and the daughter, were already dead in that one room. I always wondered what actually happened to them. But I know the story doesn't really explain what really happened to them, so I'm assuming whatever happened, I'm pretty sure that would have been terrified. I mean, despite this being the officer's story, this is actually a really good example on how to make a good creepypasta. Take this story for an example when you're writing or reading or whatever, and use that as a good example, especially if you want to see a good story. So this is actually a pretty good example because I actually seen a lot of narrators read that story and they said it was pretty interesting. So I thought, I'll give it a shot at this story, and I was finally able to find this on the regular creepypasta wiki because I was trying to look for it, I believe maybe a few weeks ago or something, or maybe months ago, and I finally found it within that time. Another thing I would have to say that I really do like is, even though the character Meek dies, with him being obese, have him having health problems and that, especially when he cut his toe and he was bleeding and all. I mean, at least it has been done beautifully. Not like any other creepypasta that involves, characters killing each other or something like that. I mean, it's pretty messed up, that, this Meek character would, be going through all this, or, the fact that, he's never cleaned his house and ages, and that he's, you know, um, basically dies at the end from so many health problems. I mean, I can honest him being overweight and that, yeah, that can increase your chances of cardiac arrest and all that. I mean, it's done beautifully, especially with how well made this story is. And I definitely have to give the author props to that. Now, I definitely like how well made this story really is with the structuring and that. So, if I had to say one thing that I wish that this story could somewhat improve, would be, the fact that the daughter and the wife died. We're not really given too much information on how they died in that, because I know they're dead, but I would like to see a explanation as to what happened with the daughter and the wife and how they died. Like, if this story goes into detail on how the wife and, daughter dies, that would honestly be very helpful, but that would also give us more explanation as to what happened. Like, that's honestly the one thing I definitely would have to that's honestly something I would say. So, yeah. That's just me, but that's just how I see personally. But that's just how, that's how I think, but I mean, about how the wife and daughter die, all we can really do now is just come up with some theories and that as to how they died. Like, I mean, that would honestly help out. But yet again, I mean, this is an older story, so I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. But anyways, you guys could state your own theories as to what happened to the daughter and what happened to the wife. So, anyways, yeah. With that being said, I'm gonna sit here and say this right now. This is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that is perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rate of this story is a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because of how well made it is, especially with, this Meek character, like the protagonist of the story. Even though he dies at the end, he kind of deserved it for all the really messed up shit that he's done and even the stuff he, went through in the past and all that. So, I mean, I know it sounds harsh, but, I know it's a story, but the protagonist of the story, when the author wrote it, made the protagonist get what he deserves. Basically, it's karma, so to speak. But, anyways, what did you guys personally think of this creepypasta? Did you enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what have you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me now what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.